Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us from. I'm Annette Richmond. This is Content Marketing School. And, Terry, I'm so excited to have you here with me today for a few reasons. I wouldn't say that I met you, but I found you through our mutual friend, Brenda Meller, because you were a presenter. I believe you were the kickoff lead presenter in her recent Shift-a-thon. And I saw you on that and I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to have him come on my show. And I'm so excited that you said yes. Plus the fact that I love, love, love this topic as we talked about in our sort of pre-show chat. So for anyone who doesn't know you, please tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. Thank you. And I appreciate you having me in that. And that shift event was phenomenal. So if anybody's looking for that, go follow Brenda Meller. She still talks about it every now and again. Hit her up on LinkedIn. Great event. Lots of talent, lots of insights. I do a handful of different things. The ones that I'm most proud of and excited about, I've been a growth coach for the last 15, 16 years. I've been a keynote speaker and trainer for about that same amount of time. Actually, the coaching came out of the speaking, so I guess the speaking happened first. And then recently, I just jumped into this world called behavioral elements to help people understand what drives their behavior so they can make better choices in their life. And it aligns to everything I've done over the past 30 years as a student with studying psychology and communication and a guy that helps build relationships and communicate more effectively. So I absolutely am thrilled to be here with you to share some of this knowledge and insights and have a wonderful conversation. So thank you again for having me.
Well, though I again, as I said, I am delighted you said yes. I always for this show, I actually invite people to come on to talk about specific topics to go along with the whole content marketing school theme. And I just want to say hello to our guest. We actually do have someone joining us from Instagram. So if you are joining us on LinkedIn or YouTube or Instagram or Facebook, even, please do put your comments or questions in the chat and we will see them here in the studio. So, as we discussed in our pre-show chat that we had a few weeks ago, I love psychology. I studied it in school. And, the first job I landed after I got my degree in psych was working at a training and placement facility for chronically mentally ill, which was really, the most dedicated, amazing students like I've ever met. But, I started there doing assessments that we used to do with the clients, career development assessments, MBTI, that kind of thing. And so I'm always very interested in all of, and all of those aspects. So I'd love if we can start by you just sort of sharing and explaining these four key drivers, kind of, what they are, because I don't know. And I don't know if our audience members would know either.
I'd be surprised if, and many of them did, right? But I'll give you the background and then we'll talk about
Okay,
the current ground, I guess, for lack of
cool.
a better term. The four drives of behavior were actually conceived, tested, and I don't know that I can go so far as to say scientifically proven, but certainly scientifically backed by two Harvard Business School professors, one of whom actually became the dean of the Harvard Business School. They wrote a book in 2002 called Driven. And this book was an exploration of a multidisciplinary science from psychology and biology and archaeology, and they compared and contrasted. If it ended in analogy, they looked at it. And in their precept, their notion, their thesis that they were trying to prove was that there are four primary drivers, and they went 100,000 years back into human evolution and really identified what moved people forward. So the first drive that they agreed upon universally was the drive to acquire. They refer to that as drive one. And that was the first one we had, right? You think about it from an evolutionary standpoint. We needed to acquire food. We needed to acquire shelter. We probably needed to acquire some kind of mate. So that drive to acquire was number one. The second drive that they identified was the drive to defend, right? So now you've got stuff. Well, you'd better figure out how to protect it. And so that was, they actually refer to that as drive four, but it was the one that actually showed up second. The drive two is this drive to bond. They recognize that people, especially in the hunting and gathering days, did a lot better if it was a communal effort. And you extrapolate that over the last 50,000 years, what they really found was groups that were really good at hunting could partner with groups that were really good at fishing, and everyone achieves more together. And so that was really cool. And then what they call drive three is the drive to learn, right? We have to be able to develop a skill set. And so in the book, which is a very, very heady little discussion because every other page is citing at least 2 or 3 different scientific discoveries over the time. In the book, they postulated, they said at some point, someone's going to come along and figure out how to measure these drives. My friend and the CEO of Behavioral Elements, Jay Johnson, has a very high drive to acquire, but more from the winning aspect. And he has a very high drive to learn. And he was he studied behavioral science and communications. And he was like, I can do this. And he put together this really cool assessment. He labeled the drive to acquire fire. He labeled the drive to learn air. He labeled the drive to defend earth. And he labeled the drive to bond water. And what I love about that is those things are recognizable, they're relatable. So when we talk MBTI, the Myers-Briggs, I'm an ENFP. I've been telling people to learn this stuff for 15, 20 years, but I'd have to talk to you for like 3 hours to hazard a guess and get 3 of the 4 right?
Yeah.
This, I can tell you in 3 minutes what's driving your behavior. And I love that.
Yeah, it's as I'm listening to you talk, it's reminding me a little bit of the whole Maslow, a little bit of the hierarchy of needs. And once you have this need met, then you can, obviously go on to the next. And I believe the top of his is like for food survival is a very, I believe, but I don't remember. Perhaps you do. I think.
That's the base, right?
Yeah, that's like the first thing. And you have to, and then as it goes up, that's right. It's I forget what the end.
Self-actualization is at the top of that
Actualization. Yes, yes, yes. And so yeah, and so this seems to be in the order, maybe not in the relationship, but the order that he put them seems to be sort of in that kind of Maslow-ish to me. But anyway, that's just a thinking that I was thinking as you were talking.
To build on that, someone made a reference to Maslow's hierarchy of needs on a comment on LinkedIn this morning.
Okay.
And I extrapolated that through the 4 drives. That happened 2.5 hours ago.
Wow.
So you couldn't be more spot on.
Wow. Hey, yay for me. All right. So cool. Now, I have actually two questions for you, and I'll leave it to you to answer them in the order that you think is most relevant and most understandable for me and people listening to this now on the podcast or on a replay. And the 2 questions are, number 1, when we're creating content, because we are here, the premise is talking about content marketing. Is it a good idea to create elements of each piece of content to attract different drives, or separate pieces, as like some people learn visually, some people want a video, some people rather listen to a podcast, etc. But the other question is, because obviously, while this is fascinating, um, I can't have all of my potential audience out there take the assessment that's involved with this. So, and maybe this will be the first one because you're saying you can tell in 5 minutes. So, if I'm learning, and of course we have to have the mini lesson here, how do you know which type of person someone is?
Well, there's some pretty telltale signs, right?
Okay.
So let's break them down again by drive. And
Okay.
let me answer your first question first.
Okay.
So I this will it'll I'll answer both, but we'll start with the first question.
All right.
If you know your audience and know what motivates them to do things, you have to speak their language. So, in some ways, maybe it's important to make 4 different types of content speaking to each of these different audiences about the same product or service,
Mhm.
right? Because they're going to relate to it differently. And so, let me break that down. The drive to acquire or fire people, they want to win, right? They're competitive. They're driven to just like go, 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 go. Got to get it done. Got to make it happen. Got to grind it out. Got to hustle. They want to win. That content needs to speak to how they can win. How does your product or service help them achieve? And it's really their only goal, winning,
Mhm.
right? And so if you can showcase that, that's perfect. And there's different levels, right? Some people with a very high fire, maybe it's just about the money or just about the things, and you can speak to how they get more than that. If it's someone with a medium fire, maybe they just like winning because they like to compete and it's the game that they enjoy. So it doesn't have to be about you're going to make more money or you're going to get more stuff, right? So there's layers like everything. So that's the drive to acquire or fire. The drive to bond, how do you help meet people better? How do I build relationships? How do I create harmony? How do I serve others? Your language needs to include that. The drive to learn or air, those folks are obviously interested in being educated, gaining more knowledge, innovating, ideating. How do you help them do that? And the drive to defend or earth is all about how do I maintain the status quo? Earth people are the ones that are going to want the most information. You know, those terms of service agreements that most of us click check or sign and don't read. Earth people read those things word for word, right? They're swayed by facts. They're very linear in their process and their thinking. So we have to meet people where they are.
Okay. So you know, all I can say about me is I'm definitely not an earth because I am one of those people and I have this has in some cases served me well, some cases not. I am a go into a company when I had a corporate type job. Let's see what we can do to make things better. What can we do? And if you are someone like that and you're going to work for a company that has if it ain't broke, don't fix it mindset, it's not for you. You're not for them. And it was a very small company. And although I was not the last in, when they did reduce staff, I was the first to go and glad of it. So, so that's so if you're talking about the different types and the content and creating different content, does it matter? Like it sounds as I'm listening to you speak that someone who has that sort of earth tendency might want to see a text post with everything written down. But can you talk to me a little bit about that?
So it's interesting. I'm not 100% sure how the modalities differ in terms of how
Okay.
they want to take in the
Hmm.
information. It's more the quantity of information that matters, right? So, like a fire person, they want to make a decision right now and they don't need all the details, don't really care about all the details, whereas an earth person does, right? And water and air are somewhere in between those two, right? So water is going to need a little more information. Water is going to be a little slower to make a decision because they're going to calculate the impact of that decision on the people around them. Fire is
Oh,
going to
okay.
be like, how does this impact me? And I'll worry about the rest of it later, right? And air is going to be somewhere in between again. So
Wow.
if that makes sense, and so whether you're doing it via video, whether you're doing a podcast, whether you're doing a written text, whether you're creating really cool images, excuse me, that's actually probably secondary compared to the amount of content and what that content says.
And as you're talking about that right now, and I'll have to give you a little, I'll have to ask you for a little me analysis, maybe when we're off camera. I don't know if it's not too harsh, maybe when we're on, but I was just thinking about sort of with LinkedIn when they started the collaborative articles, which is over a year ago now when they first started with collaborative articles. And a part of it is the sort of the gamification of it, because you contribute and you get the badge. And so it was something like that. And so I'm guessing, because I think people, when it comes to that, they have very strong opinions about it. Either they're like, yeah, let me do it all, or they're like, nah, that's just not for me. Now, me personally, I will say I contribute to them because it's nice to have the badge. It means something to some people. And because I go to their search and look for the topics that I'm interested in, it doesn't require a lot of time on my part. But would you say that that is just some things? And now the new games, which I haven't even tried, are those geared towards certain drivers? I would imagine they would be.
Yeah, so fire people are going to want the badge, right? Air people are going to want the badge. Earth people probably not, because earth people are so busy working on the things that they're actually doing,
Hmm.
and so LinkedIn's an interesting ecosystem or microcosm of the population, right? I like the more successful someone is, right? The busier they tend to be, the less time they often spend on LinkedIn, because they're like, I got to do all this stuff. I'll get to LinkedIn later, right? And last I checked, in everyone's calendar, later doesn't exist. So it's an interesting piece. But yeah, that gamification is really, really driven by that fire piece, right? That desire to acquire. Water people care, right? Because it shows how they can bond with other people in their specific area of expertise. Air people like to be seen as knowledgeable and giving type folks. So there's some play there as well.
So
Your air is very high, by the way. Your
oh,
water is probably second. Your fire is probably third. They might be close. We'd have to talk more for me to figure that one out. There's been 30,000 people that have taken the assessment so far. I have the absolute lowest score on earth that anyone has gotten in the history of time.
well,
True.
I bet you I could be very close there with you, because as you're telling me that, I'm like, yeah, that sounds kind of like me.
Yeah.
If I were, you know, wildly wealthy, I would be in college forever. I would probably be in London studying Shakespeare, because I love to learn. I love to learn for the sake of learning, but I also, like to do things, but always new things. But the thing is, when you think about things like that, I think there are things, and maybe you could go through some of those if people are exploring this and they're listening to what you're giving us, these great descriptions of things to sort of look out for. Like for me, I always like to try new things. Let's do this, but I think you can get distracted. Like you don't finish one thing before you do something else. Can you give us some things for the different drivers to sort of beware of?
Yeah, absolutely. And you nailed air's biggest challenge, right? I am a 6 projects at a time, all the time, work on this for a little bit, move on that for a little bit, get over to this other one, come up with this whole new idea that wasn't even on the list, spend way too much time on that, foregoing the other things that I've already committed to finish. I'm high air, right? That's who I am. So air needs to be really focused on completion, right?
Mhm,
We're
mhm,
excellent starters, so good at starting, but the novelty wears off. Water needs to work on being a bit more decisive, right? They have a challenge actually saying, yeah, I'm going to get this done. But if it starts to something else comes up, somebody needs their help, they're super duper people pleasers as a rule. Again, these are generalizations,
mhm, of
not
course.
there's going to be waters that aren't people pleasers, but they're going to be more concerned about that than actually finishing the task at hand.
Mhm,
Fire needs to worry about not burning people out. You can't expect you from everyone else, right? In fires, the most likely to want to climb that corporate ladder. So as a result, oftentimes people in positions of power or fire, they get really frustrated when the team doesn't match their level of energy. Newsflash, your team doesn't have your level of energy. Can't match what they don't have. And so we have to be really mindful of that. And earth needs to be a little more flexible, right? They're oftentimes very rigid, very set in their ways, very much defending the status quo until they see enough facts to be able to say, okay, change makes sense. But
mhm.
there's zero change for change's sake in an earth person.
Wow.
Almost very. And I need to add this very important disclaimer. Just
Mhm,
because you're low in something doesn't mean you're bad at it. Just because you're high at something doesn't mean you're great at it. The beauty of understanding where we come from is the saying we use all the time is behavior is a choice. We get to behave intelligently once we know where we're lacking. I told you my earth is non-existent. I've written 2 books. I've produced 200 podcasts. I've produced 15 TEDx Detroits. I get stuff done, but I don't do it. My wife's earth is very high. You put a task in front of her, she's going to sit there, get it done, and then go on to the next one. I've already told you, I'm going to do this task. I'm going to get bored. I'm going to go to that task. I'm going to get bored. I'm going to go to that task.
it's funny because now you're making me think about the Clifton strengths. It's kind of it's not that you're bad at something, but like for me, I don't speak like computer in the sense that years ago before WordPress, I've been online since like since 2000. I've had like a website with a bit online business. And my husband he's one of those like nerdy, write software type people. He tried to teach me how to just do a page, some HTML so that I could update the site. And I was literally crying because I just couldn't do it. And so the thing here, and this seems to correlate with the 4 drivers, the idea that maybe it doesn't mean you're necessarily bad, but you might want to lean into things that you're better at. And that seems, which I like. I like that idea of just leaning into what works for you. So I want to I'm so happy that you came here to talk about this today because as you can see, I am so excited by listening to this. And what what things, because we're getting kind of towards our end, and I want to share your LinkedIn profile so people can see, where you are and how to get in touch with you. And I am always having, I'm never really great at this, but here we go. So this is you,
That is me.
and you you do share information, and this is your company, and I love the whole thing. If you can talk a little bit about the logo, that would be so cool. But are you open to connecting with people?
Oh yeah, I'm a serial open networker and have been since day one. Almost to too much so at this point. For years, I was the guy that was saying quantity is greater than quality. Right now, I've backed off that stance after 15 years. Well, I my LinkedIn profile turns 20 in September. So I've been on this site for a long time, but I am very open and happy to have conversations. I share about this stuff every week, some multiple times a week. So you'll be able to get a pretty decent education just following me along.
And this free assessment, is that to deal with the 4 drivers?
Yep, that's the assessment. So you go there, you can click that link. It'll take you to a description of what the assessment is. It'll talk a little bit about the 4 drives. And then you can actually take the assessment. It takes 10 minutes of your time. You can do it on your mobile. You can do it on your laptop. It's 20 questions with 4 options under each question. And you push on your phone and drag into the right order, or you grab it with your mouse and drag it into the right order. And it's real simple to actually complete. You'll get a 6-page report that talks a little bit about you and just the overall elements in general. And then there's an upgraded version as well. So for people that want to see how all 4 show up, right? Because the reality is each drive impacts the other drive. Right. So it's showing just the primary is interesting, but seeing how the interplay between all 4 of them is really where the magic happens.
Yeah, I love that. I was actually looking before we went on earlier today, and I missed that. I was looking on your website and I missed it. I should have gone to your profile because I have to go and do that, obviously, myself, because that's how I am.
That's a really so I was, yeah, like you. I'm not quite as tech averse, right? I'll play around, but I had some technology challenges on my website the other day, and I stripped some things off, and one of them was the assessment link.
Wow.
So uh, I'll chalk that up to going back and doing that.
Well, the thing is, like, I'm fine doing video. I actually, my undergrad was in English and media studies, and so I worked. We would go out with the not the full 1-inch video, but the 3/4 inch, and do stories, and was broadcast locally, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm comfortable with all of that. But the coding is like, oh my god, no. So we are at the end, and I always like to have everyone who joins me share their final thoughts. I've asked you some things. I think we've had an interesting conversation. I'm sure people have learned by listening to you. But what would you like to share that you think would be good for people to know that we haven't discussed?
So I'll do 3 things real quickly.
Okay.
You asked about my logo. This is fascinating. My logo's in the shape of water and fire. I actually have a pendant on that you probably can't really see. Also in the yin yang shape, fire and water. I conceived this necklace and that logo a year before I knew anything about behavioral elements. Right. So that's just dumb luck that now I'm doing work with people that are fire and water. Number 2, I had a license plate for 2 years that said now our, but what it really meant was know who you are. And I think these assessments are a great way to do that. And number 3, very special offer for people listening into this episode. If you go to trybean.com/BE session, I will give you a very special price on the full assessment and a 30-minute reading with me. So trybean.com/BE session.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And this, so people will be watching this on the replay. So just want to let you know about that. So it may
Sure.
have expired by the time you're seeing this replay. You never know. So
Nah, I'll keep it up. I want to help people. I'm a
okay.
helper monkey at my heart. So that's a
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. And so are those your final words?
I think those are final words. Yeah, go figure it out, people. Learn who you are and how you show up so that you can show up better and behave intelligently.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I thank you so much. This has been such a treat for me, and I know it will be for others listening, now and in the future. So thanks everyone for being here with us, and have a great rest of your day.